whether you're ready or not. Sometimes it's rough, and it takes all that you've got, but he's been here, just waiting for you to knock. So take his hand and plant your feet on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock.
Hi, welcome to Life on the Rock. Tonight's our guests are Michael Bradley and Judy Romea, and we'll be talking about defending traditional marriage. They're two young college students out there working and striving to preach their Catholic faith to help evangelize the culture around them. They'll be sharing their insights and their work with us this evening. We also have Father Damien Ferens. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Doug.
Oh, Doug.
Good to see you. And I invited Father Damien to talk about the traditional defense of traditional marriage. Father, you are a seminary professor at
right.
St. Mary's in Cleveland. And what do you teach there?
I teach philosophy, so ancient medieval history, modern history, epistemology, and ethics.
Okay. And we were just chatting at lunch, and you just said something so simple, but it struck me in this whole discussion, debate about marriage.
Right. And I'm out in the parishes quite a bit now with teens and young adults especially who struggle with the church's teaching on this. And so one of the basic distinctions I like to make is there something that a man and a woman can do physically that a man and a woman cannot do?
Right.
Is there a difference between that? And when any reasonable person would have to grant that is the case, that only a man and a woman have the capacity to bring life into the world. And I'll say, all right, there's the groundwork. Let's start there in discussion. And to understand the church teaching, let's go there. Because there's so much, people are arguing with emotion, and I understand people get emotional and passionate about the issue, but we also have reason and intellect. So let's pull back a little bit on the emotion and have a rational discourse. Let's have a discussion and make some good distinctions about the difference between male and female and how men and women complement each other. And that's the groundwork for what we're talking about.
And I like that emphasis on the activity and maybe the ends of what the act, the marital act, achieves. And I think that's a great place to discuss this because people are trying to equate this with racism or bigotry. And we're saying these are two different realities, right? What a man and woman come together and do and what two men or two women can do.
It's a different thing.
Different thing.
It is. I mean, at lunch I was mentioning this too. Anything that a man and man come together to do sexually or a woman and woman come to do together sexually somehow is an imitation of what a man and woman do sexually.
Right.
And that's something that needs some thought. We need to process that. So if that's the case, the reality is always greater than the mimicry or the imitation of. So I'm sitting here before you, you can draw a picture of me, but this is what's real before, right? So even the sexual act between a man and a man or a woman and a woman somehow is pointing to the reality of the truth of the complementarity between a man and a woman. And I think that's something profound that needs time to percolate, and we need to think about this because it's really a profound insight.
Right. And there's such a natural blessing to it too. When you know, in marriage, we celebrate anniversaries, and we can see. We had Father Miguel's parents celebrated 50 years, and it was beautiful to reflect on that and the complementarity between the man and the woman, and how they bless each other with their own gifts that they bring to the marriage. And certainly with men and women, there's just a fundamental, irreducible difference in the sexual differentiation that's a blessing and complements the other. Right?
As men, our bodies make no sense unless there's woman. And a woman's body makes no sense unless there's men. So it's naturally written in our human makeup, what it means to be. That's right.
Father, what are the reasons you think that in our modern society why so many people are having a hard time processing that very basic, obvious fact of, you know, really simply what you just said, that it makes no sense without the fact that we complement one another?
I think the most prophetic piece of literature, I know this upsets a lot of people, but Humanae Vitae, 1968, Paul VI, he said that each and every act of marital intercourse needs to be open to love and life, so procreative and unitive. So when you start to tinker with that and say not each and every act, and when you start allowing contraception to come in, you change the understanding of what sexuality is, and before you know it, a lot of things that were really off limits before, oh, well, come on, why not? And then you move in that way. So I think once you pull out that life piece, look out.
Yeah.
I think that's
and contraception was never accepted by any Christian religion until the Conference of London of
1930.
1930.
You got it, right.
And at that point, then, very quickly, we saw this erosion take place.
And it was, even at Lambeth, it was supposed to be in very particular cases, just like an abortion, in very particular cases. But man, the cows are out of the barn.
Yeah, yeah, because it was like within a year after that the Federal Council of Churches or whatever opened the door for, over 24 more religions that embraced it as well.
That's right.
And that's why Causa Connubii was written by Pius XI, saying it's gravely immoral when you frustrate the natural creative order of any sort. So that's really, so we're dealing with the fallout of something that happened ultimately, 80-some years ago.
And here's the other thing too, that when people want to say the church hates gay people, in no way do we hate any person, and we identify someone first by the fact that they're a human being.
Child of God,
right. So we have to broaden our approach to human sexuality, and we already do as a church, but to get the message out there that we take any form of sexual activity that is contraceptive in nature as a serious offense, right? So we take a look at that. So we're not isolating a particular group. This is a challenge to married couples, and it's a challenge to every Christian to live a chaste life. So that's at the heart of what we teach, is a chaste life, right?
And that preaches the gospel, right? We live our vocations well, marriage, celibate life. It preaches the eloquence of we're made for love. We're supposed to give ourselves in love to each other and to God. And that bears witness more powerfully than anything we could say or write or in any way we could communicate the message. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Opening segment. We'll be back with Michael Bradley and Judy Romea and speaking about marriage. So don't go away. Back in a moment. Hi, welcome back to Life on the Rock. Tonight our guests are Michael Bradley and Judy Romea. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And I got your names through Dr. Jennifer Roback Morris. You all attended a conference of the Ruth Institute. Tell us about that conference, Judy.
Yeah, so I just graduated from high school. That was like 3 years ago. And a friend recommended that I attend this conference, and I thought it would be a great idea since I would be going to Stanford, a liberal university, a more secular environment, and so I attended, which was great. And it approaches and promotes the institution of marriage from a variety of perspectives, from a biblical perspective to a very political, social, economic perspective to and even a biological perspective. We had Dr. Miriam Grossman speak about the negative effects, the negative biological effects of the hookup culture, among other things. So it was a great kind of intro into what I would be getting myself into a few months later. So.
And now you're a senior at Stanford.
I'm going to be a senior, yeah.
And you're studying?
Economics with a minor in international relations.
Okay. And Michael, where are you at now?
So I'm a senior at Notre Dame, just began my senior year a few days back, and I'm studying philosophy and theology there. Right. I attended the Ruth Institute conference just this past summer. I actually hadn't heard about it until this past May when I saw an advertisement in a college newspaper. And so I applied, went, it was in San Diego, and it was just a wonderful experience. Dr. Morris was there, many of the same speakers who were there when Judy was there. And similarly for me, just great experience.
And you all are both active on your campuses. You've done quite a bit of editing, right? Tell us about the paper you were an editor for.
So I'm the editor-in-chief this year of the Irish Rover, which is an independent student-run paper, the goal of which is to sort of uphold the mission of Notre Dame as a Catholic university, hold it to its principled ideas,
So that's kind of a feisty paper, right?
It is a feisty paper, especially at a place like Notre Dame. So that's been wonderful to do work with the paper there on campus, and that's one of the venues through which I've had an opportunity to write about and discuss the topics of marriage and sexuality, especially as they pertain to college campuses.
And Ethica Politica, what's that? You were telling me about that.
So Ethica Politica is the online journal of the Center for Morality and Public Life, and I'm managing editor of that journal. And so it's sort of in the vein of First Things or public discourse, these Christian forums where people can talk at an intellectual level about these cultural issues. So that's another venue through which I've been able to sort of approach the topics of marriage and write about them and talk with other people who are writing about it, other young Christians.
And Judy, you were editor for the Stanford Review at one time?
I just finished my stint as editor-in-chief of the Stanford Review, which is a conservative, libertarian, contrarian, basically everything but liberal paper. And it draws it draws pretty much from every kind of, it draws a lot of fiscal conservatives, and they are open to publishing social conservative opinions, which I would write. So it was basically it is another independent student-run paper. Right.
And you're also a member of the Anscombe Society. Tell us about that.
Right. So back, I think, right after my fall quarter freshman years, I was approached and asked, along with another freshman, would you like to start a club that promotes marriage? And in all of our, in being naive freshmen, we said yes. And we said yes, and basically we exist to promote the values of marriage, family, and sexual integrity on campus. And that's been a very rewarding experience, definitely not without its challenges, but I think it's something that Stanford really needs. It's something I think every university needs.
Tell us what the reception of that message has been like. I know you've got some good stories of engaging people, and does anything come to mind for you, the powerful experience with that?
So I think there are two types of experiences. The first is with people who know you, generally speaking, people who you are friends with, and you being us individuals who uphold the values of marriage, family, and sexual integrity. And the second is the people who do not know you, people who know of Anscombe as this club which opposes same-sex marriage. And the first has been more positive.
And we should say, just everybody knows this, but I mean, California's been a battleground over this issue.
Right.
You're about 30 miles from San Francisco, and you're in this very hip, fast-moving culture at a premier school, and you're daring to bring a medieval church message to the campus?
I know, right? So it's so countercultural. No, it's fantastic. It's been a lot of fun in a certain sense to ruffle up a bit of some feathers, but it can be challenging in the sense that we really have to really look at our audience, right? And really see, okay, they're not ready necessarily to hear an argument maybe on same-sex marriage over and over and over again. But we can talk about something that we can agree on. We can examine marriage from different faith or religious perspectives, which we've had a panel on. We would talk about marriage as presented in a positive way through the media. We've had different events like that. Obviously, the more negative press comes whenever we do anything on same-sex marriage, but for the most part, it's been a very positive and rewarding experience.
And I would think at Stanford you'd have a lot of different religious groups.
Right.
And
we do.
But there should be a great commonality, right? Of what maybe some of these different religions teach about marriage. Did you find that true? Or?
Yes, I do find that true. In fact, that has allowed me, my wanting to get people outside of my faith tradition involved has led me to kind of establishing some of the most rewarding friendships I've ever had. I mean, I became friends with a Muslim girl just talking about Anscombe, and then, and that would lead to other larger conversations about, life and faith. In terms of Jewish, there'd be Jewish girls that I've been, talking to a lot, Christians, and even agnostics and atheists on this issue. They may not necessarily side with me, but they're always wanting to talk more and learn more about how people on the other side think.
Right. Now, Michael, I know you talk a lot about what a big question this is. If we're going to defend the church's teaching, and we could even say a rational understanding of marriage, talk about the difficulties there in this culture. What's the church up against in preaching this message?
Well, the church is up against quite a bit at this point. And really, the movement and the logic of same-sex marriage is faulty in so many ways. And so conversely, the defense of marriage ought to be such a multifaceted approach. And one can take so many different angles at defending traditional marriage. I think that Father Damien's point was crucial. Start with the baseline question of, are men and women the same or not? And are any of their differences salient to the type of relationship that we believe marriage is?
Right.
And so that, I think, should be the baseline approach for any take
Right.
on the issue.
It seemed like we've gone through a wave like of 70s feminism, trying to diminish any kind of difference. It seems like now the newer generation is recognizing real differences, and that's hopeful, isn't it?
It is hopeful. It's a good sign, because really our peers, the young, college-age students at this time, are beginning to sort of see through and pierce the web of lies that is the legacy of the sexual revolution here in America. I mean, people our age are beginning to see, no, men and women are not the same. No, we can't live our sexuality without strings attached. We're spiritual as well as bodily beings. And so young people are beginning to sort of see through, I think, a bit, the sort of this diversion, this screen of what we've been told and what we're continually told through sitcoms, through the media especially.
Right. And your work at the paper and engaging different arguments in the newspaper, what do you find is like a common thing you have to overcome, maybe to convince people on this issue?
Well, really, the first thing to know is that there are really 2 or 3 different types of defenders of same-sex marriage. The first type are people who have so much conviction about it because they have a close relative, perhaps, or a family member, or even themselves, who struggle with same-sex attraction. And so you take a different approach depending on who you're really talking with.
Right.
The second type that's a lot more common, especially at a place like Notre Dame, where the student body is predominantly Catholic, and the majority of them are typically more conservative. And yet, there, with those folks, you have to sort of get them to question the status quo, which even at a place like Notre Dame is defending traditional marriage, is an act of hatred, it's an act of discrimination. And so you have to sort of begin to break down and unearth these various layers of assumptions that most people our age are just sort of taken on. They haven't really thought about it very critically.
Right. I know, Doug, you had some questions along this line, didn't you, about engagement?
Yeah. I'm all about engagement when it comes to getting involved in these battles and these fights. You guys, obviously, you're just a little bit younger than Father Mark and me. A couple of years, maybe. And Father Mark and I grew up at a time, going through life, seeing the fallout of Roe v. Wade. Now we're dealing with 50 million plus babies that we can count. That doesn't count the abortifacients and other off the books abortions that have taken place. You're going through, your young adult years, watching this erosion of the values of family and such really, really start to unfold and fall out. And while there are, minds opening up, as you just said, Michael, and starting to see through some of the lies that are out there, there's still a large number of people out there that have bought into, whether it's the hookup culture that you mentioned earlier, Judy, or if they love each other, why can't they be together? Way of thinking that's out there. What do we do to deal with that? And I know it's a big question for considering you're not maybe traveling the entire country, but this is a problem now. There's more than a dozen states that have embraced this alternative marriage idea, and it continues to roll that direction. We have a White House and an administration that is the most pro-gay marriage we've ever had. Okay, we're up against quite a battle. What's your advice, Judy? Start with you. With how do we really form the hearts and minds of the fighters to get out there and get involved in this?
So I think the very first thing that we'd have to talk about is we need to kind of shift, kind of have our message evolve and shift from this attitude of we are defending traditional marriage to promoting traditional marriage. And I think that is a really very much, to be honest, the fact that same-sex marriage is kind of the most salient public policy, kind of controversy today, is because marriage has been in a crisis for so long, as you mentioned earlier. People have forgotten the very basic values which contribute to a successful, fruitful, and happy marriage. And you see divorce rates are out of control. People do not know, this kind of sense of, our generation has kind of lost this sense of sacrifice and the real meaning of love. And I think, while it seems kind of bleak, it also provides us with a huge to-do list as individual Catholics, to be able to say, to promote marriage and kind of abandon this notion where we have to circle the wagons and defend our principles. No, we go out there, we show people this is what marriage looks like. And I think from there, we'll be in a much better position for people to appreciate traditional marriage.
I remember last year sometime Pope Benedict talked about marriage as being an evangelization in and of itself.
Yes.
Evangelization of our call to love, to receive love, to be loved, and to give love, and to support life, give life. I know you all talk about as well, before the show we were speaking about, oftentimes this is just kind of dismissed as, well, you guys are against homosexual persons. And that's really not what we're talking about at all here, right?
No, and as Ryan Anderson has put very well and frequently, the current debate about marriage is not about homosexuality, it's about marriage. And in many ways, same-sex marriage is just sort of the most recent form of marriage revision that we're dealing with. So it itself is a symptom, of a deeper problem that we have, the broken marriage culture. And to get back a little bit to Doug's point, and to piggyback on what you just said, I do think that, for starters, one does what one can. And this repairing the culture of marriage it'll be neither the task nor the achievement of a single generation. And just as over the course of time and decades, the marriage culture has eroded in America for various reasons, it's going to take a lot of time, sort of, again, go back to the foundations in the beginning and start to sow seeds again. And as you said, Father, the greatest witness is the witness of a man and woman who's married lifelong fidelity and openness to children, evangelizes the world.
Right.
See, and I would agree with what you both said, especially the area, Judy, you addressed with regards to marriage in and of itself having a problem. The gay marriage situation is symptomatic of a bigger problem.
Right.
The breakdown of family in general. When
Exactly.
Blessed John Paul II said that marriage is family is the vital cell of society, and when that goes south, all of society begins to crumble in different areas. And as Father mentioned at the beginning of the show, the contraception being that really, kick into the door, if you will,
Right.
that really caused the problem. And that we can't be in a run for the hills attitude either. There has to be a take the beach, storm the hill sort of approach. And it's going to require a real fortitude that says, I'm in the offensive position, not to offend people, but I'm in the move down the field or charge that beach, as opposed to just sitting back and just taking the shots in defense. I agree with that. A lot of our young people in high school, college and high school in particular, have really bought into, through society, media, and so forth, whether it's MTV to your basic sitcom out there, the idea that this is just as normal as anything else. What's your comment to that, Michael, about to parents out there who are watching, knowing they're battling with their kids, what they watch on TV, what they get on the internet, about just these subtle grains of ideas that are thrown in there about, wow, they're just like everybody else. And so not so subtle, exactly. Yeah, what advice, start with you, Michael, you have for them?
Well, parents are fighting an uphill battle. They're fighting what is becoming a normative understanding of marriage and human sexuality itself, which is ultimately a paradigm of amorality. Except for rape anymore in the culture, nothing's wrong as far as what you do with your body. Right. Nothing's wrong as long as you're not harming somebody else. Right. So parents just really have to be judicious in how, when they go through these parenting decisions, where will my children go to school? To what extent will I allow them to get involved in the uncontrolled and uncontrollable realm of the internet and social media? These are hard decisions parents are increasingly going to have to make.
We're going to have to take a quick break. We're back with Michael and Judy, so don't go away. Back in a moment. Welcome back. We touched on the media. We all know the great, tremendous media pressure on this issue to accept and validate, not just tolerate, but to affirm homosexuality, homosexual practices and stuff. Now, Judy, you mentioned about feeling alone. So we got the media pressure, and then there's a temptation to feel like, hey, am I the only one that thinks this way? Am I an oddball? And that's what I hope for this show to be, is that, you know, we're showing two young college students and who are out there doing work in the field. Talk about that isolation that we can fall into.
I think it stems, it's very much a perception. You know, of course there are outside factors, that being, you know, what you just mentioned, media, it could be our professors, it can be our friends, definitely then, you know, because we always hear only of you know, advances and in this kind of general cultural acceptance of this notion of the redefinition of marriage, right? But I think you really shouldn't feel alone, and not just alone, because there are a lot of individuals who will benefit if you said something, or if you did something, or if you were not afraid to talk to them in private and admit and say, yes, I believe marriage is between one man and one woman, and not because I hate gay people, but because I believe in the good that it produces for society, namely through the healthy rearing of children.
You had experience in class with this, right?
Yeah,
Tell
I did.
us about that.
So it was an introductory philosophy class called Justice, and I had a professor. It was the very last class, and he asked, you know, going through a series of situations and asking, you know, given what we've studied, would you consider this just? And it went to California's Proposition 8. It's a lecture about I would say about 150 to 200 people, and would you consider California's Proposition 8 just? And I have to be honest, it took me a while to raise my hand, and I was the only person who raised my hand. And I knew people in that hall who did believe marriage is between one man and one woman, and did believe that Proposition 8 was just. And they were just so afraid to say anything. And then when he said, how many of you think it is unjust? And almost everyone raised their hands, and we kind of engaged in a debate that was kind of in a huge lecture hall.
How'd you do on the debate?
I mean, I outlined, it was a little bit difficult, to be honest. My professor was clearly kind of biased towards one direction, and then there was a person who was, there's a student, and I posed a particular question, which, you know, we can go into later, but if we legally redefine marriage, then what is going to stop kind of this redefinition of marriage to include polyamorous couples, homosexual, incestuous relationships? I mean, all sorts of different arrangements. Not even asexual relationships. I mean, non-sexual relationships. Excuse me.
Just any two or three or four groupings of people, right?
And one person, the student in the front said, well, you know, and you know, this is kind of controversial, everybody, but to be honest, I think if it's any kind of sort of, as long as they're consenting adults, the government should recognize as marriages whatever people want. That's problematic because then, I mean,
we have Woodstock, as you said.
Yes, it becomes, because if you really take it to its logical conclusions, you end up with a kind of a Woodstock-like situation in which there is no marriage.
Right. And you had an interesting quote from the judge, right? Was it on Proposition 8, what they said about, do you remember?
That was Michael's quote.
Oh, Michael's, oh.
Yeah.
So if Judge Von Walker's definition of marriage that he offered in striking down Prop 8 is a valid definition of marriage, not only does it allow same-sex couples, two people, to have a marriage, as you referred to, Judy, they don't need to be sexually involved at all. They simply need to be adults who want the legal benefits of marriage and the social affirmation that marriage policy provides them.
So his definition was just an emotional bonding?
Yes.
Yeah.
Shared household benefits, economic codependency. So really what we're seeing here is not so much the redefinition of marriage as the ultimate undefinition of marriage. Marriage will really become an amorphous institution based on a love that's impossible to quantify, especially from the government's perspective as it's asked to hand out marriage licenses.
Yeah.
I know Father mentioned at the top of the show about the unitive and the procreative dimensions of marriage. Maybe this is a good point to talk about what marriage is, right? We say that the man and the woman can form this union that, you know, two people of the same gender cannot form, and act as a single principle, right, in procreating life. And that's a special, unique relationship. Special in the unity that it can form, because, right, rooted in a sexual difference that can form a communion of persons that can't happen between two people of the same gender because they're complementary differences. So that's what the heart of what we're saying is that that unique relationship is not equal to what just any other grouping, right? And so trying to convince the world of that seems to be a problem in the 21st century, which is kind of mind-blowing. But you talk about that Hollywood, the media is very good at giving like an emotional argument that, you know, to be against this is to be mean. How do we counteract that?
Well, it's hard to do. I mean, in a way, it really undermines the sort of arguments that we would tend to want to make, which are principled and perhaps intellectual, philosophical arguments. And so it sort of changes the nature of the game, and yet that's something to which we have to adapt. We can't just decry it and say, you folks ought to be reasoning better.
Right.
We have to sort of accept that this is the plane on which we have to fight this battle for marriage. And increasingly, that's going to be this is how it's going to be.
Right.
And so we have to be prepared to offer counterexamples, or positive examples, as you said, of really the differences between these two things, and also to highlight the negative effects of same-sex marriage itself.
Yeah. Because I know I'm sorry, Doug.
No, I mean, another part of this picture that I know doesn't get discussed sometimes when we get into the kind of the intellectual aspects of this battle is that from a spiritual standpoint, marriage, traditional marriage, God's design of marriage, is a tremendous threat to the enemy, to the devil. It is the means by which God brings new life into the world through, you know, his design of marriage, man and woman. It's the only, through the conception of a child in the womb of a woman, it's the only place that God breathes the existence of another soul created in his image and likeness. And so looking at it maybe from a different angle here, spiritually, the enemy of salvation knows to attack God, which he can never do. Okay, just doesn't cut it. So let's go after the imitation of God, the image of God, if you will, and the actual creation of the image of God. Or that means the sacredness of sexuality, of the human, the gift of man and woman sharing and complementing. This is an area, though, that I fear we miss in addressing enough, that we need more prayer. We need deeper prayer. We need more fasting. We need more sacrifice, more mortification of ourselves to fight this fight. Because intellectually, I mean, you both know, you can have debates with people left and right. If there's an invincible ignorance there, you know, our words can't always penetrate that. We can make case after case. And how do judges sit in courtrooms making decisions on these things? They're supposed to be smart. Right? They're judges, for heaven's sake. They're sitting there making big decisions for entire groups of society, states, federal government, and yet they can't get this. It's mind-blowing, except that isn't there a spiritual element here that we need to be addressing as well as the intellectual and the debate and the political, is that we got to be calling on God more, don't we, and the Holy Spirit to get involved and start melting hearts and turning hearts? What do you think of that?
I think that's a great point to bring up, and I know that both Popes Benedict and Francis have spoken. They've talked about the same-sex movement and more generally sort of the gay lobby tactics as being the vehicle through which the devil is attacking the foundations of society. And they obviously took a lot of heat for that. And so, it's one question whether that's sort of a rhetorically sound, pastorally sensible way to approach the issue, but I think that's an absolutely crucial point.
Because it's one thing to say, to be accused of being a hater or a bigot against someone who's gay. It's a whole other thing to say there's diabolical activity behind this. Oh, so now you're saying that we're cooperating with the devil, and I know that can be a real problem for people. But in the bigger picture, really overall, there is and people are afraid to say this, but it's a disorder that is not of God, and that's something that I know a lot of people are very, very uncomfortable with. And while we love all people who are children of God, yes, the action still is a disorder and a violation of God, is it not?
It is, and I think it's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. And I do think it's crucial to keep in mind as well that a lot of people tend to conflate these two issues. They're actually separate issues. The one is perhaps the morality of the genesis of homosexuality itself, as as a situation, as a condition, and what one ought to do if one is struggling with same-sex attractions. And that, I feel, is one issue, and that ought to be kept separate always from sort of the public policy question of what marriage is.
Right.
And that's the distinction you made about the question, well, isn't this just being mean? And we're not saying the government needs to step in and legislate against all what the church would say would be sinful activity. What we're talking about here is just protecting marriage and the definition of marriage, right? We're not saying people can't do this or that by law.
As things stand, any two adults are free to live and to sleep with whoever they want to do.
Right.
The government will not stop you from doing that.
Right.
Individuals can even find a church that will sanction their relationship as a commitment or a wedding, whatever they want to call it.
And the government, the church is teaching that the government has a very serious moral duty to protect, as Doug pointed out, marriage as the foundational cell of society, right? Because it's a stable group, it brings men and women together and serves life. It provides a home, a healthy situation for a child to be raised in. Absolutely fundamental to society. So yes, the government it is its business to protect that with law. And it's a very serious obligation. Judy, I want to jump back to you according to Doug's question about the spiritual battle, because prayer very much is a part of your life. Tell us, I was impressed by your prayer life. You were telling me at Stanford with all that work, your daily mass and things.
Yeah, I do. So I do draw, my faith really does inspire me. I do, if you mean what I do, I mean, we do have a very vibrant Catholic community at Stanford. We pray the rosary every night. We have adoration twice a week. And many of us go to daily mass. Many of the members of the Anscombe Society and the pro-life group are devout Catholics. And our faith really does inspire us to uphold the dignity of every human being by virtue of being sons and daughters of God, to promote the common good, which is a society and an environment which really upholds that dignity. I mean, to really express genuine concern for the most defenseless in society, and that would include children. That being said, the issue on marriage, and I would like to reiterate Michael's point, is that the issue of marriage, the redefinition of marriage, it's not a question of faith. It's not an issue that it's not a Mormon issue, not a Catholic issue, Jewish or Muslim. It is precisely a human issue, and we can draw on these supernatural truths of the dignity of every human being, and by virtue of being sons and daughters of God. We can draw on that, but to kind of project and help people realize and rediscover human truths which have been buried for so long. But I think let's not kind of say that, I think it's important not to kind of look at this as a primarily religious issue.
Right, because religion didn't create marriage.
No.
Society doesn't create marriage. The government doesn't create marriage. It's written in our very human nature.
Right.
It's part of our revelation as Christians. We have Genesis, male and female, he made them in the beginning. We believe in that, of course, but we say it's written in our natures, this call to give ourselves to the other, to form this lasting bond. That's and I think that's something we have to remind ourselves too in this debate is that's not going away. I mean, society is trying to pretend that they can change human nature, but they really can't. And I think as Christians motivated by faith to help change society for the good, we got to tap into that and say, this is what you really want. Isn't that right?
That's right, and I think that's ultimately the greatest cause for hope and optimism. Getting back to another question of yours, if we believe that the truth of marriage is actually a foundational, fundamental truth of human nature, not simply a revealed truth, not a truth that only Christians can understand, for example, that ought to give us hope, because we realize that we all, at the base level, we really are all on the same ground, and that what we want, what we're evangelizing, the good news that we have to share, is the good news for everybody, in fact, and that at the end of the day, we're not asking them to do anything counter to what's good for them. And so I think that ought to give us hope, the virtue of hope in this project.
And kind of, going off of that, by virtue of it being a human issue, we really got to draw on, human means, right? So I think on the right, we're very strong on the philosophical and intellectual arguments, but we have this other realm of emotional arguments, which people really base their decisions to live sexually moral lives not on how much sense it makes to do so, but on how they feel.
Right.
And I think we can really inspire individuals using human means, using biology, using art, using media. I mean, really challenging ourselves and really, going out and kind of really taking Pope Francis's message and going out and proclaim the gospel to all nations, and nations in this case being ideologies.
Right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Michael and Judy. Don't go away. Back in a moment. Welcome back. We're a pretty intense discussion here. It's a heavy topic. You wanted to make a point though, Michael. I thought it was good.
So I think one of the greatest tools we can use in the evangelization of culture at this point is to point to and hold up the incredible witness that is the lives of Christians who struggle with same-sex attraction and nevertheless live faithfully according to the church's teaching. And the great lesson that we can all learn from their example is that in all of our lives, our own desires, what we want to do, shouldn't trump the wisdom of the Bible,
Right.
or the wisdom of the magisterium. And so I really think that we should hold up and admire publicly these figures.
And really just the wisdom of cultures since the dawn of time. I mean, they all have some concept of marriage, and sometimes it's more fallen in other places, but there's some essential good that culture society is trying to protect.
Mm-hmm.
And before we just change it with some court decisions real quickly, it seems like we should give pause to that.
Yeah, and something that you said earlier actually triggered a thought I wanted to share. G.K.S. Chesterton has said that tradition, in the sense of religious tradition, is actually the democracy of the dead. We're giving votes to all those who have come before us. And I really like that picture, because to me, if you think about it, if you're a young person today and you're feeling alone and you're feeling isolated, you consider the fact that you stand with the overwhelming majority of humans in the history of the world as far as what you believe is marriage and is not marriage. And that to me is an incredibly encouraging fact.
Right. Now, Judy, you're on the campus of Stanford, and you're meeting all different kinds of people. Certainly you've spoken to people with same-sex attraction. What has that been like, that kind of engagement?
So I think I think the most kind of the best approach, or at least the most effective for me, has been one in which you really have to remember and recall this is a child of God, that this is someone that you have to really treat charitably, and someone who merits so much love. And an experience with someone very close to me, and he is a homosexual struggling with HIV. I mean, you name it, he's done it. He's been there. And then when you just talking about it and talking about it with him, he didn't get defensive, and I think it was because I tried to approach it. At least I tried to remember to approach it from the perspective that, I want to show him so much love. I mean, this is not going to be a lecture. This isn't going to be a beating in two situations of which he's found himself in. But just asking him, why are you doing, exactly why is it that you choose to live this way? Why do you feel like you have to choose to live this way? And kind of helping him, or at least kind of putting the idea back in his head that he has a dignity as a son of God.
I think we see the feminine genius there, right? Nurturing life, and that's beautiful. I was thinking too, what Michael said about those who struggle with the attraction, that there's a line we used recently here on the show from the UCAT about that God is to be found more in the order of redemption than even creation. That in that struggle, bearing the cross, we find Jesus in a new way. And that's the message of hope that we always have to give. Yes, this is very challenging. If you're saying, hey, I'm struggling with this attraction, that means I can't have a family, I can't get married. And as Christians, we're preaching Jesus Christ and say He's the ultimate fulfillment of our lives. Mm-hmm. And as Christians, we need to help them get there, right? Mm-hmm. Help them to know Christ in a deeper way. Mm-hmm. You know, with all that being said, though, I mean, a lot is at stake here, and I thought you all both brought out very powerfully that some of the forces lined up on the side of gay marriage, it's not pretty, the end game or their goal. Talk about that, Michael.
So really, at this point, it's a zero-sum game when it comes to marriage. And one of the reasons I think that not as many young people who believe in traditional marriage are seeing a compelling reason to act up and advocate for it is because they don't realize the situation and that it is an endgame at this point. Already we're seeing violations of rights of conscience, rights of liberty and free speech in places like New Mexico just a few days ago, in places like Canada and Great Britain already.
What happened in New Mexico?
So in New Mexico, there was an entrepreneur, a Christian woman who ran a photography store, and a same-sex couple came to her and asked her to photograph their same-sex commitment ceremony, and she said, no, this goes against my beliefs. And the New Mexico Supreme Court ruled against her, saying that she had violated their human rights. And so this is the situation in which we're living right now. People have to realize that at the end of the day, only one of these two visions can win out. That's the logic. This is how it's been made by the activists and the gay lobby. So we need to understand that there's every compelling reason to stand up for marriage publicly. One cannot afford to be afraid at this point.
And more are actually saying that they want marriage destroyed, right? The whole institution, right?
At least in my experience, there have been more articles coming out, and we interviewed someone for kind of a series on the review of different perspectives on campus on same-sex marriage, and one kind of gave the libertarian perspective and said, I really support, marriage equality, and I think marriage is a wonderful thing. But there are also some in our movement who kind of wish to abolish marriage in its totality, simply because marriage has historically been, so I think, a patriarchal institution. And this is not something that, it's not getting as much media attention because it isn't a pretty goal. Right. But like Michael said, it is a zero-sum game. It isn't going to be, once you redefine marriage to include same-sex couples, you're going to have to explain, which revisionists cannot, why that redefinition doesn't include polyamorous couples, incestuous relationships, non-sexual relationships. I mean, all sorts of things.
Right. I would think someone who's in the voting booth voting for this has got to think, hey, I'm aligning myself with some pretty crazy groups, Right. But Doug, you had a question?
Isn't this also leading to other areas of our society where we're seeing some erosion and breakdown with regards to human dignity and human sexuality and such? California not too long ago signed into law the public school situation where now those who have a different idea of their sexuality can now start using the opposite sex as restrooms, shower rooms, and so forth. Mm-hmm. Massachusetts has done something along these lines, but the governor of California did sign that in at the end of the summer, and that's now become law, has it not? I mean, you're from California, no, Judy?
Right.
And that's something now, 6.5 million public school students out there now, without needing any kind of medical proof from a doctor, psychologist, not even parents. In fact, the student can, I think, declare this without the parents' knowledge even, that today Bill feels that he identifies more with the feminine side, so he's now going to use the girls' locker room. This has now happened in 2 states. I mean, this is going along with the zero-sum game you're talking about, Michael. Doesn't this open the door to more problematic situations regarding human dignity and sexuality?
It does, and what we're seeing right now is the logic that underpins the same-sex marriage being carried out to its conclusion, because ultimately it results in an obliteration of gender. Right. And so in California, if I feel like I'm a girl on Tuesday, I go into the women's restroom, and that's that, and nobody can question me, no one can say me nay. And in Massachusetts now, children have the opportunity to pick their gender based on what they want to be. And so really there's a whole mixed bag of bad things coming down the road, right on the tail of same-sex marriage.
Right. And of course, there's organizations like NAMBLA out there that are promoting the adult-child relations as well, and that's also something that's behind some of this as well, isn't it, Michael?
It is, and I fear, my concern is that people won't realize until it's a little bit too late for them that all this is coming down the tracks. And I think, again, people don't realize exactly what we're up against at this point. And if they did, I feel that a lot of people, especially our age, would speak out. They would not be afraid to raise their hand in the classroom when asked, is this just or unjust?
Right.
And we made a clear point in this show too. The most powerful thing we can do is live our vocations well: married life, family life, priestly. I wanted to end on a positive note, a good note of the Catholic vision of marriage. Right. Young women, you hope to get married someday. What are you looking for in a marriage?
Well, first off, I'd like to say from what I understand of the Catholic vision of marriage is that it promises so much more joy and fulfillment than any other kind of secular, contemporary notion or understanding of marriage. And really, it isn't about marriage and money, contemporary understandings. It's really about getting married. Whether or not you believe in same-sex marriage or not, people have this notion of marriage as being that ceremony, that that honeymoon and then happily ever after. But marriage is so much more. It promises a lifetime. It's a lifetime opportunity to love, be loved, the fruit of the love which can produce another human being. I mean, it's a fascinating reality, and if we can remember that, not only will we live happily married lives, we'll be able to really promote and defend traditional marriage.
In a powerful way.
And speaking as a young Christian man too, my deepest desire is to lay down my life for others. And in whatever way one is called to do that through one's vocation, that's what we're all called to. We're called to sanctity through whatever vocation we're going to live in. Most of us are called to be married people. And so you can't give yourself away as a gift unless you have self-possession and self-mastery. And the culture's preaching a sexual narrative that's totally antithetical to that sort of self-mastery as a young man.
Right.
And so the Catholic vision of marriage is such a beautiful one because I think it really corresponds to our deepest human desires. And in a way it can sort of evoke and pull out of us those desires when the culture is trying to sort of subdue them.
Right.
And that is a truly battle-ready attitude, to be wanting to lay your life down for someone else, like a gift and a sacrifice to someone else. Good job, Michael. I'm proud of you for that one. Way to go, buddy.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Father, for having
thank
us.
you
Thanks,
for your
Father.
work and witness, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you all again sometime in the future. Well, may our Heavenly Father shine His face upon you. May He give you His peace, and may He strengthen you to live the gospel, to know Him in a deeper way, and to love Him more. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week.